Okay, everybody, it is Tuesday morning, about 3:30 in the morning. And the reason why I'm doing this video at this time is we have some really exciting legislation coming out of the state of South Dakota. They have just introduced a Second Amendment Preservation Act bill, SAPA, and actually, it was introduced back in early January. It's House Bill, what is it, 1052, and it just passed the House today, and it'll be on its way to the Senate. And actually, we got a lot to talk about here. So let me back things up. First of all, for anybody that just clicked onto this channel or checking it out of curiosity, the channel is SAPA Central. SAPA stands for Second Amendment Preservation Act. And basically what that is what the Second Amendment Preservation Act does is, how do I put it? Okay. What it is the state in which it's passed will not recognize any federal gun laws. They only recognize the state gun laws. So if ATF or any kind of federal authority comes into a state to enact their gun laws, none of the state law enforcement will support them. In other words, the feds have to do it on their own. Okay, they'll only work to enact their own gun laws, and there's been a lot of this type of legislation passed in a lot of different states. There's never a penalty mechanism, a fine or anything like that if the law was broken. So basically, all they were is worthless resolutions. The state of Missouri was the first state to pass a Second Amendment Preservation Act that actually had an enforcement mechanism in it. And we passed that last year in 2021. And in the state of Missouri, if any state law enforcement officers try and help any federal law enforcement officers enforce a federal gun law that's not recognized by the state, then they're who they work, who that law enforcement officer works for, that office or whatever, you can sue them for $50,000 per occurrence. And I can tell you right now, there might be people saying that, well, that's not going to do much or anything. It works because it's shut a lot of things down here in Missouri. It's kind of a long story. I can't really get to that in this video, but that's kind of what it's about. And I'm sure a lot of you on here are already pretty familiar with SAPA. I have some other videos. You can check those out. It's about 2 or 3 of them now. Channel just started. But anyway, basically what we do in this channel is we're tracking any kind of SAPA legislation around the country. And basically what we'll do is when we find it, we'll showcase it and get information out about it. I'm kind of trying to make this like a one-stop shop for all things SAPA, where people can come in here to get information, like whatever states might have it or whatever. Or also, if people have information on something like it's kind of hard for one guy like me to track an entire every state in the country and look up legislation and stuff. So if somebody else knows of something, they can come on the channel and leave something in the comments. It's basically just something where what I'm hoping to make out of it is where everybody can add to it, and we can track SAPA legislation all throughout the country. Not only just track it, see what's going on, but also to help pass it. Like I said, I was very active in passing SAPA in Missouri, and so I learned a few things. And of course, I was just one person among many. And so what we'll also be trying to do is when these legislation comes up in other states, is to try and help them get it passed in their states. So, with that said, now you get a little background on it. We're going to talk about the SAPA legislation here in South Dakota. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to, and I'll leave this in the show notes below. I'm also kind of a regular guest on a channel called Missouri Freedom Initiative. It's hosted by Patrick Holland. That's his channel, and I've worked with him quite a bit. We've worked together to get SAPA, but like I said, it's more just to it. There's a lot of people involved, but I worked with him pretty close to help pass SAPA in Missouri last year, and so I'm on his channel a lot. And just Sunday, today's now Tuesday, but on Sunday, February 13th, he had a guest on in the second half of his show, and I will leave that in the show notes in the minute mark so you can go straight to it. But anyway, this lady, her first name is Michaela. I don't have the last name with me at the moment, but she's with a group called Young Americans for Liberty up in South Dakota. And she came on his show and talked about the legislation. It's House Bill 1052. And at that time on Sunday night, it was still in the House, but yesterday now on Monday, it was gonna be brought up in committee, to go over and be voted on. So at that time, after showing everything, I got some information from her and stuff. And today, I just kind of laid back to see what would happen with it. And, now that it's done, everything's passed, I'm doing a video on it now. So with that information, like I said, you might want to check this out too to get a little more background on it. And so with that said, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over here in the South Dakota House. Now, this bill, 1052, its first reading was way back January 11th, and it's referred to the House Judiciary Committee on the 12th, scheduled for a hearing on 26th. They moved it up to February 14th, which was now yesterday. And what was great about this, first of all, before we go any further on this, I want to show you the original bill. Okay. Now, this is the original bill as it was filed. It's actually very short. It's basically less than a page. So we're going to go over this real quick because when you kind of look at this bill, you look at it and say, yeah, compared to like what we had here in Missouri, doesn't really look like much. But what happened to it while it was in the committee is just what they've added to it. Man, it's going to be awesome. Well, let's just look at this first. We'll just read it. It won't take long. What we have here, let me put that up here. An act to place limitations on the enforcement of federal laws and directive related to firearms and ammunition, being enacted by the Legislature of the state of South Dakota. Section 1, then a new section be added. All right, here's what it says. No state agency, political subdivision, or any elected or appointed official or employee of the state or a political subdivision may contract with or in any matter provide assistance to a federal agency or official with respect to the enforcement of a federal statute, regulation, or executive order which imposes a prohibition, restriction, or requirement that does not exist under the laws of this state and relates to the sale, transfer, ownership, or possession of 1. A firearm or any component or accessory, or 2. Ammunition or any component or accessory. All right. I'll go to section 2 here. Section 2, that a new section be added. Any elected or appointed official or employee of this state or of a political subdivision who knowingly violates Section 1 of this act is subject to. Now, and this is where I talked about where other similar SAPA type legislation was passed in other states. They didn't have what really kind of rendered them impotent and kind of useless, unfortunately, as they weren't subject to any kind of fine or anything like that. Now this one though, it does have that penalty mechanism, but when this original bill when it's introduced here, all right, anyone who knowingly violates Section 1 of this act is subject to 1. A civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for first violation and Class 1 misdemeanor for a second or subsequent violation. Any civil penalty collected by a court in accordance with this section must be paid to the state general fund. So basically, when it first came out, or as you know, as of Sunday night, Michaela was on Patrick's show talking about it. Basically, the penalty mechanism was only $1,000. Yeah, it's a penalty mechanism, but yeah, not that big, not much one. So it's kind of like, we're looking at it as like, well, hey, it's better than nothing. At least they're getting something out there. Maybe later on, if this gets passed, who knows? Next year they can amend it or something. Make it a little more of a penalty. All right, but let's finish this here. This act does not apply to any contract requiring provision, assistance, enforcement, federal statute, regulation, or executive order if the contract was entered into before July 1st, 2022. All right. But now, what happened? This was the original bill as originally introduced. Let's go back here. And now, it's yesterday now, when they had the hearing, the judiciary, they made a motion to amend and pass both two different amendments, Amendment 1052C and Amendment 1052D. Now, I read both these amendments, and they're almost the same exact thing, except 1052D has a couple extra things on it. So instead of going through both of them, we're just going to go through 1052D. Let's see if this is it. This might be C. Yeah, that's C. Let's go hit D. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but basically it's a lot more of the Missouri SAPA in there. You know what? Wait a minute. See how many pages this was. It's only 3 pages. What the heck? We'll go through it real quick. But what I want you to see is the enforcement mechanism, what they raise that penalty to. That's what makes this thing so awesome. All right, being enacted by the Legislature of the state of South Dakota. Okay, this first page we already read that. Here's where the amendments. In fact, what's this original one first? Okay, section 3. So we're gonna go into section 4 here. Here's where the new stuff starts. Okay. A new section be added to Title 23. No state agency, political subdivision, or any elected or appointed official or employee of this state or of a political subdivision acting under governmental authority may enforce or attempt to enforce any federal action described in Section 1 of this Act. Nothing in this chapter precludes the acceptance of aid from federal officials for the purpose of enforcing the laws of this state. So, the feds can still enact gun legislation if it's state gun legislation, but not their federal legislation. That if they do that, they're on their own. They get no help from the state. All right. Now, Section 5, new section be added. Any political subdivision or law enforcement agency that employs a law enforcement officer who knowingly violates this act is liable for any injury caused to a person and is subject to imposition by a court of a civil penalty. Now, get this. This is what they added on during the session there. Of a civil penalty in the amount of $50,000 per violation. So, say you're living in South Dakota and the feds come in your state, try and get your guns or whatever from some new legislation passed, on a federal level, and the state doesn't recognize that. If any state officers, law enforcement officers, assist the feds in helping them out there, you have that person is subject by court of a civil penalty. I guess that means you got to sue them. I'll have to get some later clarification on that. And the amount of $50,000 per violation. That's just that same thing as the Missouri one. So that is definitely a penalty mechanism, and believe me, it works. Like I said, we got all kinds of stuff going on here in Missouri. Like I said, you have to check some of the earlier videos. We're gonna have time to get into it here, but believe me, it works. It's it's changed a lot here in Missouri, and it's got a lot of feds and law enforcement officials mad. But anyway, any political subdivision or law enforcement agency that knowingly employs a person who is found to have violated this act is subject to a civil penalty in the amount of $50,000 for each person so employed. Ooh, yes. The court shall forward any civil penalty collected under this section to the state treasurer for deposit in a general fund. Any person may seek the issuance of a temporary or permanent injunction to restrain and prevent a violation of this act. Any prevailing party other than a political subdivision is entitled to receive reasonable attorney's fees and costs. All right. And down here, let's see, it says it's not a violation of this act for a person to provide material aid to a federal law enforcement officer who is in pursuit of a subject having a demonstrable criminal nexus with another state or country. So, in other words, if it's like an, say a crime that crosses state lines or something like that, or another country, then the Fed, the state can assist the feds with that. That's what it's looking like, provided the suspect is not a resident of this state. Oh, and not present in this state, or during an emergency situation involving an active shooter on federal property located within the state of South Dakota. All right. It is not a violation of this act for a person to provide material aid to a federal prosecutor in any felony case involving controlled substances or violence against another person if the case includes weapons violations of laws that are substantially similar to laws of the state, and if the weapons violations are ancillary to the prosecution. It is not a violation of this act for a person to seek federal grants to fight domestic violence or human trafficking by those who are breaking South Dakota or federal law. So basically, what happened is during the session yesterday, or during the hearing, they passed that amendment, basically boosted the penalty up from $1,000 to $50,000 per occurrence. That is awesome. I'm telling you, man, that'll be a huge deterrent in keeping state officers from assisting federal officers when they come to get your guns, because it's working big time in Missouri. And like I said, that's a whole nother story. I've got some videos on that. All right, but it did pass. Passed 8-4. I guess there's about 12 people on that committee. Um, let's see. We got the names here. I don't know who's Democrats or Republicans. I'm not familiar with the South Dakota legislation. I'm basically just picking this up, I got wind of it Sunday. But what I plan on doing here, and the reason why I showed this to you, is now that they've had that, it looks like it's passed the House and it's going to go into their Senate. What I plan on doing, I was getting ready to say tomorrow, but almost 4 a.m. in a few more hours. I am going to try and find represent or get a hold of Representative Aylward. He's the one who introduced the bill, and I'm gonna see if I can talk to him and get more information on what to look forward to as it goes through the Senate, and not only that, but to see if there's any way that we can help him as far as phone calls, emails, who we should contact or anything like that. Um, so I'll be working on that tomorrow, and the young lady I mentioned in the on Patrick's show that we talked to Sunday night. I'll see if I can't get a hold of her too and get some more information. But I'm going to get some more information on this. So, guys, I want you to keep checking back on this channel because SAPA is just getting started in South Dakota. And it looks like it's going to be a really good one. And we're going to need to get this thing through the Senate and get it to the governor and get it signed. So, the party's just getting started. Like I said, I'm going to try and contact this guy tomorrow. There's no guarantees because I know they probably got their budget going, probably redistricting. I imagine just about every state's doing those two things right now. So I imagine he's a pretty busy guy, but I will I will keep at it until I get a hold of this dude. Like I said, hopefully it'd be nice if I could do an interview with him and we can really go over and stuff, as far as what we need to look forward to as it goes through the Senate, who we might need to call, email, or whatever like that, because it's not just enough to read this stuff, go, oh, great, it's in there, hopefully it passes. Now, we want to make this stuff pass. Believe me, it's worth the work. But yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that right now. And like I said, I will be on this, and I also understand Pennsylvania has some kind of SAPA legislation, so I'll be looking into that. I'll be looking at checking out other states. You know, I'm just one guy. Well, also, I've always said in my other videos, I'm not afraid to ask for help. If any of you out there know of another state that has SAPA type legislation, put it in the comments, and man, I'll get on it, start checking it out. But I guess that's pretty much it for right now. Like I said, keep checking back. If you subscribe or whatever and click that bell or whatever, that way you get notified. Because, like I said, I plan to get more information on this. This thing's just getting started, and we don't want to just get through the House. We want to see it get through the Senate and get signed by the governor and become law and keep spreading throughout the country until we get all 50 states. All right, guys, with that said, thanks for watching. And if you like what you heard, spread the word.